If you are watching this on March 23rd, 2026, and you have been following the conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran over the past several weeks, then I need you to stop whatever else you are doing right now and pay very close attention to what I am about to tell you. Because 3 weeks ago, something happened on a battlefield in the Middle East that every defense ministry on the planet is still quietly processing, and the full implications of what occurred have not been explained to the general public anywhere near clearly enough. 7 senior Israeli military officers were killed in a single strike. 1 missile, 1 impact. 7 commanders gone simultaneously inside a command center that was specifically designed, reinforced, and protected to survive exactly this kind of attack. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. 10 interceptors were launched to stop that missile. 10 Arrow systems, THAAD batteries, Patriot platforms, all of them engaged, all of them failed, not one of them connected. The missile flew straight through one of the most sophisticated layered air defense networks ever assembled in the history of modern warfare, and it did so as if those interceptors simply were not there. What you are about to hear will fundamentally change how you think about military technology, about the balance of power in the Middle East, and about what modern warfare actually looks like in 2026. Let me set the scene properly because the context here is everything. Somewhere inside Israel, there was a heavily fortified IDF command center. This was not a temporary field position. This was a permanent, reinforced, hardened military installation built according to Israeli military doctrine that has been refined over decades of conflict experience. The philosophy behind that doctrine is straightforward. You construct your command infrastructure to be survivable. You go deep underground, you reinforce the structure, you surround it with multiple overlapping layers of air defense, and you ensure that even in the most intense conflict, your military leadership and command networks remain intact and functional. That doctrine has served Israel well for a very long time. It was built on the assumption that the threats it would face followed certain predictable physical rules, rules that modern air defense systems were specifically engineered to exploit. On the day that Iran fired the Fatah II, every one of those assumptions was shattered simultaneously. Video footage captured the moment an Iranian hypersonic glide vehicle struck that fortified command center. The strike killed 7 senior officers, along with numerous additional personnel. 7 commanders in a single impact from a single weapon that a combined array of the most advanced interceptor systems on Earth could not stop. This was not a lucky hit. This was not a malfunction in the defense network. This was a demonstration, the first real combat demonstration, of a category of weapon that the entire framework of modern air defense was not designed to handle. And to understand why this matters so much, and why defense officials from Tel Aviv to Washington to London are losing sleep over it right now, you need to understand what makes this missile fundamentally different from everything that came before it. The weapon responsible for this strike is called the Fatah II. It is an Iranian hypersonic missile system developed by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a successor to the earlier Fatah I design. The name in Persian translates to conqueror, and after what happened at that IDF command center on March 1, 2026, that name carries a weight it did not carry before. To understand what makes the Fatah II so different from the missiles that air defense systems were built to stop, you first have to understand the basic physics that all existing interceptor technology is built around. Traditional ballistic missiles, the kind that have been flying in conflicts for decades, follow a predictable trajectory. They launch, they arc upward through the atmosphere, they reach the peak of that arc, and then they descend toward their target. The path is curved, and it is consistent. Radar systems can detect the missile at launch, track it through its arc, calculate where it is going to be at any given moment in the future, and use that prediction to position an interceptor at the right place and time to achieve a collision. That is the entire operational logic that multi-billion-dollar air defense systems are built around. Predict the path, intercept the path, destroy the threat. The Fatah 2 does not follow a path that can be predicted. Instead of carrying a standard ballistic re-entry vehicle that descends on a fixed trajectory, the Fatah 2 deploys what is called a hypersonic glide vehicle. This is a maneuverable payload that can alter its course through the atmosphere at extreme speeds. It can shift direction in both pitch and yaw, meaning it can change where it is heading both horizontally and vertically while traveling at velocities that most interceptors are physically incapable of matching. Think about what that means for an air defense system trying to stop it. Imagine you are trying to catch a ball that someone has thrown, but halfway through its flight, the ball suddenly changes direction. Not once, but potentially multiple times. And it is traveling so fast that by the time your brain has registered the direction change and your arm has begun to respond, the ball has already moved again. That is the challenge, translated into the language of physics and engineering, that the Fatah 2 presents to every interceptor system currently deployed anywhere in the world. And the speed involved makes the problem almost incomprehensible. Iranian officials have stated the Fatah 2 is capable of reaching between Mach 13 and Mach 15 under ideal conditions. To put that in terms you can feel, that translates to somewhere between 15,000 and 18,000 kilometers per hour. At that velocity, a missile launched from western Iran can reach targets across the entire Middle East in under 10 minutes. 10 minutes from launch to impact. That is the total window of time available to detect the launch, confirm it is real and not a false alarm, make a decision to engage, fire interceptors, and achieve a successful interception of a target that is simultaneously maneuvering unpredictably. Against a traditional ballistic missile, 10 minutes is manageable. Against the Fatah 2, 10 minutes is essentially nothing. Building a weapon that operates at these conditions is an engineering achievement that should not be underestimated. The temperatures that a hypersonic glide vehicle experiences during flight exceed 2,000 degrees Celsius. Most materials simply cannot withstand that kind of thermal stress, while simultaneously maintaining the structural integrity needed for controlled maneuvering. Guidance systems that work perfectly at normal speeds become extraordinarily difficult to operate reliably when the vehicle carrying them is experiencing those temperatures and forces. Maintaining stable control at Mach 13, while the airframe is being subjected to thermal conditions that would destroy most materials, is an engineering challenge that only a very small number of nations in human history have successfully solved. Russia has done it, China has done it, the United States has been working on it for years. And now, operating under decades of heavy economic sanctions that were specifically designed to cripple its technological development, Iran has done it too. And it did not just build it, it used it in combat on its very first operational deployment, and it worked exactly as designed. Now here is the detail that stopped defense analysts around the world cold when it became public. The admission that the Fatah 2 had fundamentally broken the existing framework of missile defense did not come from an Iranian general celebrating the strike. It came from inside the Israeli defense establishment itself. Uvel Basisi, the vice president of Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, which is the Israeli company that develops many of the interceptor systems that were fired at the Fatah 2 that day, went on public record to state that the Fatah 2 had forced both his company and the Israel Defense Forces to completely rethink their entire approach to missile interception. He said directly that hypersonic missiles open a new era in air defense. He warned publicly that traditional interception methods cannot be relied upon against this category of weapon. He then offered an analogy that has been quoted in defense circles ever since. He compared attempting to intercept a hypersonic missile with a single interceptor to defending against LeBron James with a single basketball player. You can chase him across the court, but you are not going to stop him from scoring. The vice president of the company that builds Israel's interceptors just told the world in plain language that Israel does not currently have a reliable answer to this weapon. That is not a statement made lightly, and it is not a statement made by someone who wants to admit it. He said it because the events of March 1st left him no credible alternative. The strategic implications of what happened at that IDF command center extend far beyond the immediate tragedy of the officers killed. For decades, the foundational premise of Israeli military doctrine, and by extension, American military doctrine across the entire Middle East theater, has rested on the assumption that hardened, reinforced command infrastructure is survivable. You build your command centers deep, and you protect them with layers of defense. And whatever else happens in a conflict, your military leadership structure stays intact. That assumption is what allows military planners to project confidence, to maintain command and control under fire, to ensure that even in the worst scenarios, the decision-making apparatus of the military remains functional. The Fatah II struck directly at that assumption and destroyed it in a single impact. The use of this weapon against very high-value command infrastructure demonstrated not only a precision capability that is extraordinarily difficult to achieve at hypersonic speeds, but also the capacity to penetrate the existing multi-layered air defense network that was specifically positioned to prevent exactly this outcome. Precision at Mach 15 is not supposed to be possible under the engineering assumptions that most defense planning was built on. And yet the missile found a specific reinforced building, navigated through 10 fired interceptors without being hit, and struck with enough accuracy to kill 7 senior officers inside. The timeline of this weapon's combat debut adds another layer of significance to what happened. The Fatah II had never been used in actual combat before March 1st, 2026. It was a known development program. It had been publicly discussed by Iranian officials, but it had never been tested against real targets in real conditions with real adversary air defense systems actively trying to stop it. Iran reached into its arsenal and chose this weapon as its response to the coordinated, large-scale military assault that the United States and Israel launched against Iranian territory. The very first time the Fatah II was fired in anger, it killed 7 Israeli generals and penetrated a fortified command center. That is not a statistical fluke. That is a weapon performing exactly as its designers intended, under genuine combat conditions, against the best air defense systems available to any military on Earth today. And the IDF command center was not the only target that day. Iranian military sources and regional intelligence reports confirmed that Fatah II missiles were also used to strike American military facilities in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar. Multiple high-value installations across the entire Gulf region were hit in what amounted to the operational combat debut of an entirely new category of weapon. U.S. bases that American forces rely on as the foundation of power projection throughout the Middle East are now operating with the confirmed knowledge that Iran possesses a weapon capable of striking them with high precision and an extremely low probability of being intercepted. That knowledge changes everything about how commanders at those bases think about force protection, about personnel dispersal, about the vulnerability of infrastructure, and about what it actually means to maintain a forward military presence in a theater where this weapon exists and has already been used. The uncomfortable strategic reality that nobody in Washington or Tel Aviv wants to state publicly, but that every serious defense planner is now wrestling with, is this. If you cannot stop the missile once it is in the air, the only meaningful option remaining is to destroy the launcher before it fires. That logic sounds straightforward, but what it requires is offensive military operations deep inside Iranian territory to locate and eliminate mobile launch platforms before they can be used. Mobile launchers are specifically designed to be difficult to find and to move frequently to avoid being targeted. Achieving that kind of preemptive suppression of Iranian launch capability would require a level of air superiority over Iranian territory that does not currently exist, and that Iran's own air defense network is designed to prevent. So the military community is now confronting a scenario where the defensive solution to the Fatah II essentially requires an offensive campaign of a scale and intensity that carries its own enormous risks of further escalation. The broader geopolitical context surrounding this weapon makes the picture even more significant. Russia has its Oreshnik hypersonic system, which has already been used in Ukraine and shares certain trajectory characteristics with what Iran demonstrated in this strike. China has its DF-ZF hypersonic glide vehicle. North Korea has been conducting hypersonic glide vehicle tests. The similarities between Iran's Fatah 2 performance and Russia's Oreshnik are not coincidental observations. The world's most advanced hypersonic programs have been operating in an environment of shared technical knowledge and parallel development. And what Iran deployed on March 1st reflects that broader technological ecosystem. The message being absorbed by every nation watching this conflict is that hypersonic strike capability is no longer the exclusive province of the world's 2 or 3 largest military powers. A country operating under severe economic sanctions, with constrained access to global technology markets, has successfully developed and combat-proven a weapon that defeats the most sophisticated air defense systems that American defense spending has been able to produce. That fact does not stay contained within the borders of the Israel-Iran conflict. It radiates outward to every regional power, every aspiring military developer, every nation that has been told by its own government that its air defense investments keep it safe. Developing an air defense architecture capable of reliably addressing hypersonic threats of this type would require not months but years of engineering work and financial investment measured in tens of billions of dollars. The zone-based interception models that researchers have proposed, where multiple layers of interceptors attempt to engage an incoming hypersonic vehicle at successive defense perimeters, represent a theoretically promising direction. But even if the funding were approved tomorrow and the engineering proceeded without obstacles, years would pass before such systems could be deployed and operationally proven. In the meantime, every fortified command center, every airbase, every military installation across the Middle East and potentially beyond now exists under a threat that the current generation of air defense technology cannot reliably answer. The question that every defense ministry on Earth is now asking is not whether the rules of modern warfare have changed. They have. The question is how quickly anyone can develop a credible response, and whether that response can be developed fast enough to matter in a conflict that is happening right now, today, in real time. 7 Israeli officers are gone. A fortified command center designed to be survivable was not. 10 interceptors failed, and Israel's own defense industry has publicly confirmed that the era of traditional missile interception as the primary answer to this category of threat is over. The Fatah 2 did all of that on its first day in combat. The world is still calculating what that means.